Welcome to the most overrated, underappreciated, overwatched, underwatched podcast of all time. Welcome to the Prince of Fresh Air. How you doing, boss?
How you doing, man? It's a long time no see.
Oh man, white privilege and black pride comes together. How great!
It's fantastic. It's about time.
How's
it's about time. I've been begging you to come on for a while now.
You gotta beg the black man. This is the world we live in now.
That's the best world there is. That's the best world there is. Everyone's begging everyone for a little slice of something.
The Slickman kissing ass over there? No.
I'm on, aren't I?
So, let's get right into it. We're going to get controversial right off the bat.
Let's go. Let's do it.
All right. So, this topic kind of came about because I was watching a Ben Shapiro video. You know who that is, right?
Yeah.
And he did he was on the show as a guest, and one of the panelists on the show was Zoe Tur. If you don't know who she is, he is. She is a transgender woman. And one of the topics that they talked about was how to identify gender, how many genders there are. And Ben Shapiro is very stuck on his ways that there are only two genders, and we live in a society now that, people can identify, as what you want. But at the end of the day, you're a man or a woman. So what do you think about that? Because there's a lot of different opinions out in this world now.
Yeah, to be honest, especially the world I'm in, with work and stuff, and kind of my career, you get a little bit of everything, which, to be honest, for the majority of my life, I really didn't have. I was grew up in one area with predominantly, white Irish Catholics everywhere, and that was about it for the first 18 years of my life, right? And then college, then the real world kind of came about, right? And to be honest with you, man, at the end of the day, whatever you want to say you are, or think you are, or feel you are, or believe you are, it's just not my place to say that. For me, it's I consider myself a man, that's me, right? If you want to do you, man, you do you, right? If you were to come to me and say, hey, I think I'm a woman, right? I'd be cool, awesome. Let's record the show. For me, I don't know. For me, I don't know if pass is the right word. It's just I don't read into it too much.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, I think, right, for that person, that ultimately makes them feel like themselves, right? It makes them feel happy, right? It makes them feel okay with going about life every day. And I think that's honestly all I could really want. I know for myself personally, that's something that even I struggle with, right? I worry about, being happy, this, that, all that stuff, right? Making the most out of everything. So however way you want to do it, whatever works for you, it's your mind, it's your life. Who am I to say one way or the other if that's good or bad, right? If you're happy, then hell yeah, brother, hell yeah, sister. That's kind of how I look at it. I wish I had a more of a hot take, but to be honest with you, it really comes down to what makes the person happy, what makes them feel comfortable with themselves.
You don't have to have a hot take, because I got it. So before I give my opinion about this, one thing that Ben Shapiro said, he did a reaction video to it, and he was saying that, as a person, if he's at dinner with someone, they say, oh, can you address me this way? There's no problem. But when you come on national TV and you try to do this political correctness and make people, lie and become a yes man, because at the end of the day, Zoe Tur is a man, regardless of, the hair and the, surgery if she
yeah.
did it. But I think we live in a culture now where it's not so much the gender thing. It's becoming increasingly difficult to follow. So for instance, I was watching Good Morning Britain, and Piers Morgan had this same discussion where in Britain, they recognize 100 different genders. Mm-hmm. And now, a lot of people don't realize this, but in Canada, you could go to jail for, addressing someone as the wrong pronoun and stuff like that, which is a topic for another thing. But I think at what point do we draw a line with the gender thing? Next year, what if there's 200 different genders? Now that just complicates everything.
Yeah, I mean, to be big picture for a minute, right? If we've learned anything over the last month or so, that our country is kind of behind in some things, right? With adjusting to the, like, you know, life, new things, right? Hearing people's voices and accepting that and celebrating it, right? If you think of, you know, if it were, excuse me, early 1900s, and I said, hey, I think I like men, right? Like, I'm going to a psych ward, right? Like, that's just kind of how it was, right? And I feel like now it's more, you know, we've gotten to a point where, like, that's completely okay, and it should be okay, right? Like, it should. Like, who is anyone to say you're wrong for thinking one way? Like, everyone should have their opinion. Everyone should feel comfortable in their own skin, right? But I'll be honest with you, I think it's all about, like, you really got to educate yourself, right? There's a lot. I remember I saw a list one time, and there was, like, I don't know, a bunch. So I'm a little not too knowledgeable on the subject of the different pronouns and everything beyond just, you know, the more common ones out there. But, you know, honestly, to be honest, like, if there was something random where there was one where it's like a XE or something, like, just really crazy that I would just never think to use, right? So from that point, I think drawing the line in the sand, I don't know if you really can draw the line in the sand, right? Because going back to my original point, right, you can't, for me, I'm not going to go tell someone, you know, that's too far, right? That crosses a line for me. I'm not okay with that. Who am I to not be okay with that, right? Like, I apologize because I'm not familiar with it, right? I need to educate myself to understand it, right? But if that person never crosses my path in life, then I'll probably never know about it, to be honest with you, right? Like, that's kind of how I look at it. And I understand that there's a lot of different things, right? I think, you know, someone identifying as a crayon doesn't really make sense, right? Or, like, you know, a tree or something like that, like, inanimate objects doesn't make sense, but in my mind, and that's my opinion, right? But, like, it's not really up to me to say what you want to do or what anyone wants to do, right? So I think that's, you know, I think some people might think that that's a safe answer, but honestly, I think that's just kind of how I look at it, you know, like, there's a lot, and I was educated a little bit when I started my job. They do a really good job of just making sure everyone's aware of everything going on in the world and very up to date with things, which is awesome. So I did get a little education there, but beyond that, like, I've never come across, you know, something to that extent where I'd be like, whoa, that seems like a line. We should draw a line here. Like, this is just getting out of hand, right? Like, I've never come across that. So to be honest with you, like, I don't know if I can draw that line. I don't know. What would you say to that? Because I know, you know, I'm East Coast, you're West Coast. West Coast is a little more progressive, right? So has that come across your daily life, or, you know, kind of what's your take on that?
You know, first, before I answer that, I'm offended. You didn't ask me my pronouns, Brandon.
It's because you assumed mine to start off the call. So I'm just gonna, we go way back, man. You can't pull that on me. I'm sorry. I was gonna call you Percy, so.
You know, I gotta troll you a little bit.
No, I know.
No, it's all, you know, it's one of those things of now that I live in LA, I've noticed that the East Side is a lot different than the West Side, for sure. The East Coast are more, you know, firm and, you know, traditional beliefs and, you know, stuff like that. Whereas the West Coast, everybody seems like they experimental with life, which is, you know, it's fine. And I've seen all walks of life, both in New York, you know, because as in, like, Greenwich Village, you know, there's a lot of the LGBT community down there. But in LA, there's certain areas like Greenwich, for instance, there's certain areas where you'll see, you know, different diversity. But it's one of those things, man. It's hard to talk to people about this, and I'm glad I had you on the show, because when I do decide to have someone, you know, talk about it or just try to open up the discussion, it always gets shots down. You know, the moment I say something that I don't coincide with someone else's belief, I'm a homophobe, I'm a transphobe, and you know, it's all this nonsense. And that's my biggest issue with the LGBT community. And it's not always just them, and it's not everybody, but it's just the idea that, you know, they always push you have to be more inclusive and you got to respect everybody's opinions and stuff like that. But then when you go have a discussion and your opinions are different than them, then you get called out your name and all this stuff. And so it's one of those things where I try to have that dialogue, learn more, because I know some things, but I don't know everything. But every time I try to have that conversation, I get shut down and I get lobbed with insults all day and every day, which is fine by me. I'm a troll. But yeah, it's the disappointing part about that. I think the refusal for a lot of them to educate the ones that don't know. And the ones who want to know but don't know, they get called all these different names. So it's kind of productive to say, we're all about inclusion and respecting opinions. But then, when you come forward, everything goes out the window.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, right? But like, I think the way you just got to think about it, like it all goes back to like judgment, right? Judgment and self-awareness. Those are the two big things for me, right? Like one, I realized that the second you don't judge someone else for things that they do or they say, right? So in this case, who they are, right, to themselves. The second you let go of like, man, that crosses a line, or man, like that's wrong, or man, like this, that, like, or this, like the second you stop that, like that opens up a whole new like headspace for you, because I think a lot of our time is spent judging people on their actions, right? And then also self-awareness to just know like, maybe I should go educate myself for that time, right? Like it's gonna happen. I'm gonna cross someone's path, right? And I'm gonna say the wrong thing, or like, why don't I just go take half an hour and learn it? Like I can Google it, right? It's at my fingertips. There's no excuse for me in a world today to not be familiar with it. Like,
white privilege.
100%, dude, 100%. There's no way, right? Like, if you want to go to that, like the whole BLM movement, right? Like, there's no, it's not black or white. It's not this. It's literally humanity and morality, right? It's like, do you care about the person or do you not, right? It's not a political thing. Like I know you talked about this on the last show, which was great, by the way. Donald did a great job, right? It was awesome, but like, people get so entrenched in like, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm this, you're that. Like, it's not that, right? It's like humanity is at the same level. We're all equal. I don't care what you call yourself. I don't care how you look, as long as you're respectful of other people, right? You don't hurt anyone, and you don't try to like, do anything to really hurt someone's mental health, right? And physical health. Like, that's really it. That's really all you can ask for out of people, right? That's kind of how, judge, quote unquote, is the wrong word, but that's what I look for when I, create friends, this or that. So like drawing the line in the sand for me, I feel like is against kind of the way I try to live my life, right? Because even in college, right, I had some really, really great friends that were gay, right? And those two people became some of my best friends that I still talk to today, still hit up every now and then. I hung out with one of them the other weekend, actually, and just had a great time. We just drank all night. But it's just like, I root for them as much as I'd root for you, or I'd root for Donald, or any of my friends, right? Drawing the line in the sand, like, for me, like I said, it's at our fingertips, right? There's no reason I shouldn't go educate myself, because it's going to happen. I know I'm going to cross that path. I can be wrong and have them say, you should know this or that. But like, honestly, it's on all of ourselves just to like understand the other side of everything, right? Put yourself in that person's shoes. Could you imagine if someone came up to you and like misidentified you, or like did this, did that? Like, I know you're a very genuine person, although you are a troll, right? To certain, right? Like, like that wouldn't feel too great. Right? Like, I wouldn't feel too great. I can't really imagine it, but like, put yourself in their shoes, right? Put myself in your shoes to begin with, right? Like, all the stuff going on right now, it's disgusting, right? So like, for myself, right? Why wouldn't I take the time to educate myself to understand the other side of something, right? Instead of just having the same opinion I've had my whole life or whatever, and saying, this is my opinion, I refuse to think about the other side of things. Right.
I firmly agree with everything you said. To be honest, I'm one of those, there's only two genders, and I do believe in the idea that, you could be a feminine man, you could be a masculine female, and there's no problem with that. I think the problem becomes where there's all these different labels, everybody has different sets of rules, and, because there's so many different genders that a lot of people are recognizing, nobody is given the time to learn about them. So, I get thrown in a situation where someone wants me to call this and that, but I'm not familiar with it. So, the fact that I want to be educated. Yes, I might believe there's two genders, but in this podcast, I talk about being open-minded. So I'm always willing to understand, how did you come up with, come to this, conclusion that, about yourself, and educate me more. But when that happens, for some reason, a lot of people just, you just a idiot and, homophobe, you don't understand. And it's like, of course I don't understand, because you won't, educate me.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing too, is like at that point, from that person's perspective, right, who you're looking to for advice and guidance on it, then they're being judgmental back to you, right? So like it's on them to like, do the right thing, right? It's bigger than just, screw you for not knowing this, right? It's like, hey, we got to listen. I'm all about being proactive on learning things, but like if the self-awareness isn't reciprocated back to you, right, then, there's a problem from that person's perspective too, right?
Right.
So I understand your point of that completely. I will say, when I was in high school, it was one of my friend's dads or something was just like, yeah, there are two genders. Whatever you got down under your pants is what you are. But could you imagine going through life, right? Think about it. Whenever you're unhappy or you're sad, and then you try to ignore it, do you feel better or do you feel worse? You usually feel worse, right?
Right.
Like when you ignore how you feel to try to feel the other way, to please other people around you. Now imagine like someone who identifies as one of the pronouns, and I apologize to anyone listening to this, because like I said, I need to go educate myself, and this is a great learning point for me.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? But like, imagine how they would feel, right? So I can't, you got to find a way to be happy with yourself. And if that's it, saying, hey, I feel like I'm this would make me feel more comfortable, then I'm rooting for you, like
right.
Science is one thing, but just at a point, we live in a world where we have the technology, we have the knowledge, right, of science, to be able to make those changes, make you feel like the person you believe you are, right? So at that point, like, I get it, I do.
As you mentioned that, I want to get into a specific case of what we're talking about, but so one of the biggest issues that a lot of people have with this is that, I was watching a Steven Crowder video. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but he had a talk on a college campus with a girl, and he mentioned, so there's more than two genders, fine, and there's all these different identities and stuff like that. And she said, fine. And then one of the things he said was, so if I'm a white guy named Steven, so hypothetically, if I wanted to be called a black man named David, is that fine? And she said, absolutely. So I honestly just don't get it. I think it's one of those things where, where do you draw the line? Because now if gender is able to diversify itself, why can't skin color? Why can't our own personal? So it becomes one of those things where you open a Pandora box, and it just opens up all these different doors. So now you can't really fault a white guy named Steve who wants to be called a black guy named Trayvon, for instance. So I think that's the issue. I think we have to find a fine line and understand, or even if we don't find a fine line, just start educating the masses and people about this stuff, because quite frankly, a lot of people don't know about this stuff. And I want to keep repeating the same nonsense, but it's just one of those things where if people aren't going to educate you, then how are you going to change your perspective on things? But one thing I wanted to mention, I know you like basketball, so you might know about this. A lot of different people spoke about this. Dwayne Wade.
God, you have no idea what I would for an NBA game to play right now. Oh man, I wish. Anyways, continue. Sorry.
But Dwayne Wade, everybody knows about Dwayne Wade and his son Zion, transitioning to a female at the age 12. I firmly agree with the other side of things, what people are saying, but what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because I was actually talking to a buddy of mine about it this weekend. There's two sides to it, right? It's like, one, like, I think naturally I want to say, well, you know, she's 12 years old, right? So, like, still pretty young to make a life-altering decision. You don't know, maybe, you know, you have a change of heart, change of mind, change of the way you feel, right, later on.
Right.
Again, the age of 12, you're just starting to develop, male or female, right? Kind of depends on, you know, kind of your background, your, you know, bloodline, how that kind of works out and stuff. But at the same time, right, if you've lived your whole life feeling like you are someone else and you cannot be that person, right, but you have the opportunity to be that person, like, why would you not take it, right? But, like, at the same time, 12 years old,
there's not much time,
right? If I were to say, for me, I am probably a completely different person as I was when I was 12 years old to now.
Exactly.
Right? So, like, I have different beliefs, different mindsets, a lot of different stuff, right? So from my perspective, it's like, well, I know the amount I've grown, like, you know, mentally, but since I was 12, so 12 more years. So that's kind of the way I think about it. It's like, well, you know, I hope it's okay 12 years from now for her. But yeah, it's kind of one of those gray areas where it's like, I naturally am hesitant, right? Because, like I said, she's really young, but at the same time, like, hey, clearly she's happier this way, right? So, like, who am I to say, it's too young? Like, you know, kind of is what it is. But, you know, if she turns around and says, whoa, I didn't really know myself, this is the wrong decision, then that's another whole conversation. But,
you know, it's one of those things for me. And like I said, this is like a podcast where a lot of different opinions can be respected and disagreed. And it's tough for me to just fathom how a 12-year-old can make such a big life choice. And one of the things that stood out about this whole thing was the fact that the family, Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle, said, you know, she's leading the family. It's just one of those things where there's a reason why there's child laws. You know, in an active world, you can't. If you're a kid, you got to get a child's permit, and you only can work a certain amount of time, and your parents have to be on set. You can't drive until a certain age. You can't drink to a certain age. So how can a little kid all of a sudden just up and change their gender? I think that's it's one of those things where, like, I definitely respect everybody's choice, and you know, commend Zion for such a brave you know, new transition in life. But you have to wonder, like, why are all of these people that, you know, in their circle, and I understand there's a bunch of yes men, but why nobody speaking up about it? I mean, 12 years old, I wanted to be Spider-Man. I wanted to jump off the wall. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to climb up walls.
I thought I was going to play at University of North Carolina and be the next Tyler Hansbrough, but clearly that did not happen. So, right, like, yeah, man, it's weird. It really is weird. Like, I'd be lying if I said I didn't think it was a little weird, because of the age. Actually transitioning, not weird at all. I think the age kind of makes me kind of think twice about it, more than I would if, you know, someone else told me that. But from talking to friends and talking to people who are in my circle who are gay, this or that, like, they've all said, like, oh, you know, if you're gay pretty early on, or you, like, that's the person I've talked to, they were gay. They're like, yeah, I knew when I was a kid, like, I, you know, in this situation, it was like, I like men, right? Like, that person knew that pretty early on.
Right.
But then it's like, you know, if that person's older, you think, you know, 15 years ago, the world was a totally different place, right? Even to now. So if you were to telling me, right, Dwayne Wade and his kid, right, like, back then, might be a different story. But we're in a world now where it's celebrated instead of scrutinized, right? And I think, which is a great thing about humanity, is that we are progressing in a good direction. Took long enough, but it seems like we're getting better at it. But yeah, no, I think it's just the times help, right? It's celebrated instead of scrutinized.
It's one of those. I mean, it definitely opens up a conversation, and it's one of those things where it brought me back to that case. I think early last year, where it was that, I think it was the Texas mom who had the 6-year-old son who had an idea that he was a girl, and so she went through with it and tried to get I could be wrong. I think it was trying to get his documents changed into being a woman. And the father was like, hell no, this is not happening. And they went to a court, and I think the father ended up winning. But it's one of those things where if the father wasn't there, a 6-year-old kid was about to make this big life choice. Where do we draw the line? I mean, how do people... How are we letting kids make such big decisions? Because if that's the case, they could go flip some burgers at McDonald's and start paying taxes if that's the case.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point, right? I think it's a problem with a lot of the world. I think there's got to be some sort of legislation or something that says there has to be some sort of age where you can start making a decision like that, because that is life altering, right? And I think what would be important for that piece of legislation, whatever it is, I have no answer for you, but it needs to be decided by people who have experienced that life situation, right? You can't have like someone who's just, a white male who, like me, knew he was a white male from the day he was born until now, right? Like, you need people who have experienced that and have gone through that to make that legislation, or to take care of that issue of, the 6-year-old being able to choose that, I want to be a female now, or I want to be a male now, right? So like, I think that's the big thing that a lot of the world doesn't get, is like people who make legislation tend to not have gone through the thing, aka we have a very high percentage of males in Congress and the Senate and in office, usually always in office, right? Like, right. And then we argue issues about a lot of stuff, right? That like males haven't gone through. So, you need people in the situation to make legislation, make decisions, who have had that personal experience, because that makes it a whole other world, right? It's really easy for me to make a decision on something I've never experienced because I have no emotion attachment to it, right? But if I went through it, I'm educated, I know more, right? And I can tell you exactly how it affected me. And you fill it with a room of people who it's affected them. I think that's where you actually have real change in the world. And that goes for a lot of different things besides just, deciding whether you should be able to change your gender or identity at the age of 6,
Yeah, that's a big problem. And it's one of the biggest issues I have. And it's one of those issues where I may not know everything, but I do watch a lot of videos and I try to read a lot of articles about it, keep up to date. But it comes back to the point that I feel like for some reason, a lot of people see the LGBT community as a cash grab, and they just see it as let's jump on this wave and, let's capitalize on it. And it's unfortunate, one prime example would have been, what's that singer name? Sam Smith, for instance, he came out bisexual one year, and then the next year, all of a sudden, he's something else. It's like, all right, now you guys are pandering, to, and trying to, jump on this bandwagon and, try to get them to, you're trying to be inclusive, but you're doing it for the wrong purpose. And a lot of TV shows and movies are doing it where, a lot of them are just trying to jump on the bandwagon just because, they realize it's a cash grab opportunity for them waiting. And for, God forbid they ever say anything negative, they know because someone's going to pull a plug on the show. And right. I just never understood why they have so much power. Why people abuse that power that they have. It's just one of those things where it's not talked about a lot. People mention stuff about it, but nobody ever talks about how, it's just basically a bunch of yes men at the top, and they use this community as a cash grab, to further. Yeah,
it's a platform, right? It's a platform for attention, and that's totally the wrong way to look at it. Look, I would love for humanity to get to a place where we don't talk about the LGBT community. We don't talk about, the Black community. We don't talk about this. We talk about the human community, right?
Right.
Could you imagine a world where we didn't talk about the LGBT community? We didn't talk about the Black community. We didn't talk about the white, whatever. It was just the human community. Could you imagine a world with no bias because of how you look or who you think you are, like, and
unfortunately, I don't think so. So I took a psychology class when I was in college, and one of the things I realized was that, you know, a lot of people don't, you know, as kids, and I mentioned this before, kids don't grow up knowing, you know, skin color. They don't know about, you know, people's sexuality or gender. You know, they just play with whoever. You know, it doesn't matter, you know, what you look like.
100%.
But unfortunately, a lot of parents and a lot of environments that they grow up in kind of influence that. And so, you know, kids go from, you know, sweet, innocent little kids to now, you know, people growing up to be racist and, you know,
that's the thing about the unconscious bias, right? Like, that's the thing, you don't even know you are, especially like if you just grow up in a household, right? Your parents think one way, you're naturally going to probably think that way, right? Like you kind of just, you know, assume your parents are always right, this, that, but it's like unconscious. You don't realize it until you like wake up and realize, hey, maybe that's not the way I should be thinking about something, right? Like, and the other thing to say, going back to your question, just reminded me, was Nickelodeon. I don't know if you saw this today, or I think it was yesterday.
The SpongeBob thing?
The SpongeBob thing. Yeah, SpongeBob is, right? Like, SpongeBob was gay. That's what it was. I didn't read it, but I saw a lot of like
he's
tweets about it.
Apparently. Asexual.
Yeah.
I mean,
come on. You can't tell me that character seemed, you know, I definitely thought, you know, maybe gay, maybe this, maybe that. But to be honest, like, I was watching freaking SpongeBob. Never crossed my mind. I never questioned whether, you know, Patrick or SpongeBob or Mr. Krabs or Squidward were gay or straight or what. Like, I was just watching SpongeBob. I probably wasn't thinking anything.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's one of those things, and like I said, it's a cash grab. You know, everything is a big announcement. Everybody got to throw a grand old party. It's SpongeBob. You know, a lot of kids don't know about, you know, what is asexual. A lot of adults don't even know what asexual is. So, again, I think it's just pandering to the community, and it's one of those things where, unfortunately, it's going to keep happening. And so, like,
the intent
is the problem.
I think the intent is meant to be good, right? I think the intent is for, you know, a 6-year-old. I'm 24 and I watch it, but like, you know, like a 6-year-old or someone young, right? You're coming home from elementary school and you're going to turn on SpongeBob. Like, imagine growing up where you saw characters that were gay, bi, trans, like, and it was just natural. It's just what you know, right? That's the thing. You and I grew up, we're close to the same age. We grew up where like the world was different, right? Not much different today, but it was a little bit different. So you and I naturally grew up like with this idea of like LGBTQ, like, is a community, right? Like, they, you know, that community, thankfully, right, has been more accepted by more people within the last, you know, 10, 15 years of our lives. But like, could you imagine if, like, you know, our kids one day, you know, grow up in a world where, you know, there are trans characters, there are this, there are that. Like, I think the intent is for a fantastic reason, right? But it also comes with the fact of like, are you throwing too much information at kids too early? Which I think you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, it goes down. Look at the 6-year-old boy who wanted to be girl. Exactly. It's one of those things where I think, and you know, a lot of people are going to say, well, you know, a lot of these shows push, you know, heterosexual, you know, relationships, and you know, that's true. I can't deny that. But what's happening is now, you know, people realize, oh, okay, there's a big movement going on, so let's just make everybody some type of LGBT character. And it's one of those things where...
Right, it's a trend, right? Like, if you're, like, right, don't be the trend because it's cool now, right? Do it because you mean to do it, right? And that's something we'll never know why, you know, if Nickelodeon meant it to do it that way or because it's trendy now and people will applaud you for doing it, right? Like, that's where it kind of gets iffy for me, right? Like, are you doing it for the right reasons or are you just doing it because it's trendy, right? And you said it's a cash grab. So I'm totally on board with that. Like, if you're doing it for the right reasons, I'm all for it. But if you're doing it to be trendy and cool and hip and like, you know, because it's the hot thing right now, which is the total wrong way to look at it, like, shame on you.
Yeah, and it goes back to my earlier point, like I mentioned. You know, one of the episodes that I did previously was cancel culture. And now it seems that cancel culture is starting to use LGBT as a way to, get people, canceled. And so you're seeing a increase, for instance, like I said, Ben Shapiro, when he did the show and he got in a little tussle, none of the panelists defended him. And when, she threatened him on national TV, they all blamed him. They didn't protect him. Nobody came to his defense. Everybody just blamed him. And it shows you that, it's one of those things where people are, just yes man, it's a hype trend. And, Caitlyn Jenner's winning Women of the Year award. It's like, what is happening here? You know what I'm saying?
It's way easier, right? Like, it's way easier to agree with the majority. Like, it just is, right? Like, you avoid the conflict, you avoid the argument, you avoid this, but you get nothing accomplished that way, right? Like,
exactly.
Look at Black Lives Matter the last month, right? Like, less than the last month, but like, white people, right? And I want to make sure I say this right. Like, finally woke up, probably because everyone had nothing better to do but to pay attention to what was happening, right?
Right.
But for the longest time, it was probably easier for that person to just ignore it, go on with their daily life, just say, well, I'm just going to not say anything because I don't want to do this and that and blah, 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 right? Like, whatever your reason was, but like, it goes back to the same logic, right? It's so much easier to agree with the majority. You look at Hollywood, a place that you're in now, right? Like, very, very progressive, very left, very, very this, very that. But like, you have someone like Tom Hanks who has definitely talked about being, right, a conservative, right? He said it's very hard for him to be in Hollywood because he has different opinions from people.
Absolutely.
And he just sort of stays silent on it, right? Unless he feels like he needs to speak about something. It's just like, it's almost like, what's the best thing? Be silent, talk about it, cause a fight, no one backs you up, this, that, whatever. Like, so to Shapiro's point, it's kind of get both sides, which is hard, but, just because you have the minority opinion doesn't mean you're wrong. I'm not saying he was right or wrong, right?
Right.
You're always going to look wrong if there's 9 people saying you're wrong and you're the only one saying you're right.
It's unfortunate that we live in a society now that people are afraid to voice their opinions, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, because I realized, one of the things, I don't really talk about is the fact that I don't post anything related to any big movements or any type of political or.
It should be normal. Like, hard conversation should be the norm, and that's the problem, is people don't want to sit down and have those tough conversations, right? They don't want to see from the other perspective what things look like. It's a very different world.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's unfortunate that people are getting silenced for their opinions, and that's a big issue. And you're seeing this, as someone in the entertainment business, I realize the moment I say anything negative, someone could see that in Hollywood and be like, you know what, we don't want to work with him because he doesn't, hold the same values that we have. Although they might not, they might agree with my values, but they realize if they, voice their different opinion, that they will. And
exactly.
It shouldn't be that way. It should be all about respecting everybody's opinions, which is why that's why I said that's one of my biggest issues with the LGBT community is that, they preach about different opinions and expression, but they don't really allow that. They just allow, it's either you're agreeing with me or you're against me. And the moment, you don't agree with them, they call you a bunch of names, and not all of them. Let me reiterate that, but you get slandered with all these offensive comments and stuff like that. But if I say that to them, now I'm the bully,
Yeah, no, I feel you. If someone's not, like, you got to be willing to have the conversation, whatever side you're on, right? If I were to come to you and say, hey, like, I have some questions about Black Lives Matter. I have some questions about everything about George Floyd and everyone before him, because we know there was many more before him, way more that we even know, that we don't even know about, right? Like, I would hope, 2 points. One, I would hope that you'd be open to having that conversation with me. But also, it's also on me to educate myself, right? It shouldn't be your job to tell me about something that's been out in the open for my whole life, right? Like, it's on me, but I would hope as my friend or as someone, you know, who's experienced that firsthand, like, you know, I want to understand from your perspective too, right? As well as educating myself on what's really happening, right? So like,
yeah, that's the beauty of it. And a lot of people might mistake me, you know, because I have these opinions that, you know, I'm stuck in my ways. And I always preach, come with an open mind. Yes, we all have different opinions. That's what makes us unique. But we should all be able to come together and have these discussions. And I think we live in a society now where it's tough to have these conversations because the moment you disagree with someone, you know,
exactly. You hate the person says you're wrong and I can't hang out with you. I can't do this. Like, look, you should be able to go to a bar, right? You should be able to have a conversation with someone that's very, very difficult and then continue to have a drink with that person after. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's something that me and my girlfriend, we don't agree on everything. We have those hard conversations about points of view, this, that, things going on in the world. And, you know, we're still boyfriend and girlfriend. We get along fine, right? But like, that's because, you know, it's just, that's the way we want to be able to have open conversations about things the way the rest of the world should be.
Right. Yeah. It's you know, it's always been uncomfortable for me to, you know, mention race and, you know, all the sexuality and all this stuff, just because like, it's not a problem for me. And, yeah. And now, and like you said, will we ever come to a time where, you know, none of this stuff is talked about? I don't think so, because it's always going to be an issue with something. You know, it's always going to be, somebody's going to feel oppressed. Somebody's going to feel like their voice aren't being heard. And someone is always going to think they're better than others. And again, it also comes down to, just because everybody has different opinions don't mean we can't all come together.
Also be humble, you know what I mean? Like, have humility when you come into, you know, a conversation or
humility.
I know for you, you know, it's a little, you know, I don't know if that's a word in your vocabulary, but you know, I'm joking.
Now you got to pay me for me to listen to your opinions. $3,000 for your opinions, Brandon.
If I could do it, I would, but no thanks.
I'll give you a couple months. I'll charge no interest.
That's even worse. I don't want interest.
No, I said no interest.
No, okay. All right, then I'm in.
So I'll just bump it to 4,000 now.
Over the span of how long? Can I do a payment plan? If we do a payment plan, I'm down.
Yeah, $100 every 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's not gonna work.
Hey, Bill Gates does it, you know. I think
I'm not Bill Gates, man. I'm sitting here talking to you.
Two white guys, come on, you got the opportunity.
Yeah, you know what? I do. So it's on me. I should be able to pay you $4,000.
Yeah, perfect. We'll talk about the payment options. Anything else you want to get off your chest? Maybe about, you know, just the LGBT community, or just the fact that, you know, being open-minded, stuff like that.
No, to be honest with you, like this conversation, right? A lot of people will view it as like a very hard conversation to have nowadays, but I think it's good. You know, I think, you know, you and me, you and everyone else you have on the show talking about these hard things is going to really open some people's minds up. I really do hope this, you know, your show does, you know, reach many people, because I think a lot of people can relate. I think a lot of people can draw insights and learn, right? I think the hardest part is people educating themselves on topics going on, right? I think this does a good job of that, you know, from many different perspectives. So, no, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you having me on. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it's, you know, I work with a company, and I try not to mention names, you know, just for confidentiality purposes. But one of the bigger things, one of the things they do is they do these videos that, you know, seem like it's has an agenda one way, but they turn around and there's a whole different meaning behind it. And I think it's one of those things where it's a way to start or spark a conversation without actually just headfirst diving into it. But, you know, for me, I think it's important that as we're living in such a world, you know, where everybody's cooped up at home and we have all this chaos going on, that we should be able to talk about this. And that's why I try to, you know, spark those conversations. I get right into it because, you know, eventually we all have to address it at some point. We all feel these ways. You know, you go on Twitter, you see all different opinions, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't get the platform to talk about it. So you know, now they result to hate speech or quote unquote hate speech, and you know, and bullying people. But this is why I wanted to start this podcast, just to, you know, get people who might have a different opinion, who has an opinion, but, you know, doesn't have a safe space to talk about it. I encourage people to just come up and, you know, and talk, you know. Yeah,
no, exactly. And I think the more people you can have at your table, right, that varying opinions, I think the better an end goal and product will be, right? I'm a big believer in that. So I think what you're doing and what I think the world is slowly moving to is just that. So I think, you know, there's promise. There's a lot of work to be done, but there's promise.
Yeah, I mean, the days where I can just ask you for your credit card and you just give it to me. Yeah.
I already owe you $4,000, so I can't give you more money.
Hey, I said I won't charge interest, but I got the delivery fee. Yeah,
by the time it's $10,000, and then you get interest on the fees, so then your no interest becomes like double interest, right? And smart man. I don't know. Acting was the wrong career. It should have been a mathematician or a, you know, astronaut.
Hey, I could do both. I could be the good version of Harvey Weinstein, but I told you I'm a troll.
I know. Just sitting here, just smiling. That's all.
But yeah, man, it's been good. If you don't have anything else, I think that's a good way to wrap this conversation.
That's it. My dog seems like she misses me, so I'm gonna have to go take care of that. But I appreciate you having me on, man.
Absolutely.
Good seeing your face. Hopefully I can be on a bigger screen soon, and best of luck, man. Let's do this again soon.